The Knight family had always operated on a rigid social hierarchy and everyone knew their place. At the top sat my Uncle Harrison, successful real estate developer who owned half the commercial properties downtown. Below him, my cousins. Rebecca the corporate lawyer, Jonathan the pharmaceutical sales executive, and Marcus who'd recently made partner at an accounting firm. Then there was me, occupying the bottom rung at 28 years old. The family member they tolerated with polite resignation, included out of obligation rather than genuine affection. What they saw was Alexandra, the quiet relative who worked at the county hospital, lived in a modest apartment, drove a practical sedan that had seen better years. They'd constructed an entire narrative around my life based on surface observations. Struggling financially, working as some kind of medical assistant or technician, unable to afford the lifestyle they considered appropriate for a Knight family member. What they didn't know was that Dr. Alexandra Knight was the youngest chief of cardiology in the state, having earned the position at 27 after completing a fellowship at Johns Hopkins and publishing groundbreaking research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures. My techniques had been adopted by hospitals nationwide, reducing patient recovery times by 40% while improving surgical outcomes across all age groups. More significantly, they didn't know about my financial situation. The combination of my hospital salary, consulting fees, medical patents, and strategic investments had generated a net worth that exceeded most of their combined assets. Last year alone, my income had topped $800,000. But I lived quietly, invested wisely, and preferred substance over show. Let them maintain their assumptions while I focused on saving lives and advancing cardiovascular medicine. The annual hospital fundraiser provided the perfect opportunity for family condescension disguised as charitable involvement. St. Mary's Hospital held its annual fundraising gala every October, a black-tie affair that raised money for equipment purchases and facility improvements. This year's goal was $2 million for a new cardiac surgery wing, complete with state-of-the-art operating theaters and recovery facilities. Aunt Catherine had volunteered the entire Knight family to help with event coordination, assigning roles based on her perception of everyone's capabilities and social standing. Uncle Harrison would give the keynote address about community investment. Rebecca would coordinate the silent auction, her legal background making her perfect for handling high-value items and donor agreements. Jonathan would manage corporate sponsorships, leveraging his pharmaceutical connections for maximum contributions. Marcus would oversee the financial logistics, ensuring proper accounting for all donations. Then came my assignment. Alexandra, dear, Aunt Catherine announced during Sunday dinner at Uncle Harrison's estate, we have the perfect role for you at the fundraiser. She handed me a box containing rolls of raffle tickets and a small cash box. Raffle ticket sales, she said with that particular smile reserved for simple tasks given to simple people. Very important work. Every dollar counts. The subtext was clear. We're giving you something you can handle without embarrassing the family. Raffle tickets, I repeated, examining the box. Perfect job for you, she continued warmly. You work at the hospital so you understand the cause. And it's not complicated, just sell tickets, collect money, smile at donors. Very straightforward. Uncle Harrison nodded approvingly. Good thinking, Catherine. Alexandra knows the hospital environment, can speak from experience about their needs. Exactly, Rebecca chimed in. And raffle sales don't require any special skills or connections. Just basic customer service. Just basic customer service. Like I was qualified for entry-level retail work rather than performing complex cardiac surgeries that saved lives daily. Plus, Jonathan added helpfully, the raffle booth is usually staffed by volunteers, so Alexandra will fit right in with the other community helpers. Community helpers. The category they'd assigned me based on their assumption that I worked some support role at the hospital rather than practicing medicine. I think it's wonderful that you want to contribute, Aunt Catherine said. Not everyone in the family has the connections or expertise for the high-level coordination roles, but every contribution matters. They were literally assigning me the volunteer work while congratulating themselves on including me in their important charitable efforts. The St. Mary's Hospital Foundation Gala was held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, transformed into an elegant venue with crystal chandeliers, white linens, and centerpieces donated by the city's premier florists. 500 guests in evening wear, representing the community's business leaders, medical professionals and philanthropic families. I arrived wearing a simple black dress I'd owned for years, carrying my assigned raffle ticket box, and was immediately directed to a small table near the entrance where other volunteers were handling registration and information distribution. My family, meanwhile, occupied a prominent table near the stage, dressed in designer formal wear that announced their importance to anyone who bothered to notice such things. The raffle ticket assignment became more humiliating as the evening progressed. Guests approached my table with polite smiles, purchasing tickets for prizes donated by local businesses, restaurant gift certificates, spa packages, weekend getaways to nearby resorts. "Are you one of the hospital volunteers?" a woman in pearls asked while buying $20 worth of tickets. "Something like that," I said, not bothering to correct her assumption. "It's so nice that the hospital includes support staff in these events," she continued kindly. "Everyone should feel like they're part of the team." Support staff. Another person who'd looked at my assignment and drawn conclusions about my role at the hospital. Meanwhile, my family held court at their table, networking with other donors, discussing business deals, making the kinds of connections that reinforced their social standing. Occasionally one of them would glance in my direction with an indulgent smile, pleased that they'd found an appropriate way to include their struggling relative in their charitable endeavors. The irony was spectacular. I was selling raffle tickets to raise money for a cardiac surgery wing that I would personally be using to perform life-saving operations, while my family networked with people who had no idea that the woman behind the raffle table was the reason many of them might survive a heart attack. 3 hours into the event, the formal program began. The MC, Dr. Patricia Hoffman, who served as the hospital's chief administrator, took the stage to thank sponsors and recognize major contributors to the cardiac wing project. "Before we conclude tonight's program," she announced, "I want to recognize some very special supporters whose contributions have made this project possible." She began with the corporate sponsors: pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, local businesses that had donated significant amounts. Each announcement brought polite applause as company representatives stood to acknowledge the recognition. "Now," Dr. Hoffman continued, "I want to recognize our individual donors, starting with those who have contributed at the platinum level of $50,000 or more." My Aunt Catherine leaned forward at her table, clearly expecting to hear the Knight family name called for their $5,000 contribution. The platinum donor list included several recognizable names: retired business executives, prominent attorneys, families whose names appeared on hospital wings throughout the city. Each donor stood briefly as their contribution was acknowledged. "Moving to our diamond-level donors," Dr. Hoffman said, "who have contributed $100,000 or more to this project." 5 names were called. Standing ovations for each one. Aunt Catherine looked puzzled that the Knight family hadn't been mentioned yet. "Finally," Dr. Hoffman said, her voice taking on a tone of genuine reverence, "I want to recognize our single largest individual donor to the cardiac surgery wing project." The ballroom went quiet. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the revelation of who had made the truly transformational contribution. "This individual has donated $500,000 to ensure that our cardiac surgery program remains the most advanced in the region. Their generosity will directly save hundreds of lives in the years to come." $500,000. The number rippled through the audience like electricity. That level of contribution came from serious wealth, the kind of donor who could single-handedly fund major medical advances. From my raffle table, I could see my family craning their necks to identify this mysterious benefactor, probably calculating which local business executive or inherited wealth family had made such an extraordinary gift. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Hoffman announced, "please join me in recognizing our largest donor, Dr. Alexandra Knight, Chief of Cardiology." The silence was absolute. Then the spotlight found me behind the raffle ticket table. 500 faces turned toward the small volunteer table where I stood frozen, cash box in one hand, roll of raffle tickets in the other. The spotlight was blindingly bright, transforming me from invisible support staff into the center of attention. Dr. Hoffman continued speaking, but I could barely process her words over the roaring in my ears. Dr. Knight has not only contributed financially to this project, but her innovative surgical techniques and research have put our cardiac program on the national map. The new surgical wing will feature equipment specifically designed to support the minimally invasive procedures she pioneered. The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation as people realized they were honoring not just a major donor, but the medical professional whose work would make the new facility revolutionary. From across the ballroom I could see my family's table. Aunt Catherine's condescending smile had completely frozen. Uncle Harrison's mouth hung open. Rebecca and Jonathan looked like they'd been struck by lightning. "Dr. Knight," Dr. Hoffman called through the microphone, "would you please join me on stage?" Every step from the raffle table to the podium felt surreal. 500 people applauding, cameras flashing, my family staring in complete shock as their volunteer raffle ticket seller transformed into the evening's most honored guest. Dr. Hoffman handed me the microphone. "Dr. Knight, would you like to say a few words about why this project matters to you?" I looked out at the audience, then found my family's table in the crowd. For faces staring back at me with expressions ranging from confusion to embarrassment to something approaching panic. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. As Chief of Cardiology, I see every day how advanced surgical facilities can mean the difference between life and death for our patients. Chief of Cardiology. The title hung in the air like a physical presence. Murmurs rippled through the audience as people processed that the woman they'd seen selling raffle tickets was actually one of the hospital's top physicians. This new cardiac wing will allow us to perform procedures that simply aren't possible in our current facilities. We'll be able to save patients who, under current conditions, might not survive their heart attacks or cardiac episodes. More applause. I could see people at my family's table whispering to each other, probably explaining who I actually was to the other guests who'd been wondering why the raffle ticket volunteer was receiving such recognition. The $500,000 contribution comes from my deep belief that every patient deserves access to the most advanced cardiac care available, regardless of their ability to pay or their insurance status. The standing ovation that followed seemed to last forever. When it finally subsided, Dr. Hoffman took the microphone back. "Dr. Knight has asked that the new surgical wing include a community care program, ensuring that her advanced surgical techniques are available to all patients, not just those with premium insurance coverage." More applause. I made my way back toward my family's table, knowing that everything had changed irrevocably. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations from colleagues, introductions to hospital board members, and conversations with other donors who wanted to discuss cardiac surgery advances and community health initiatives. My family sat in stunned silence, processing the fact that their raffle ticket volunteer was actually the hospital's chief of cardiology and the evening's most significant donor. As the event concluded, Aunt Catherine approached me with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete bewilderment mixed with something approaching embarrassment. "Alexandra," she said carefully, "I think we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, gathering up the remaining raffle tickets and cash box. "I had no idea about your position at the hospital." "Chief of Cardiology? When did that happen?" 3 years ago. When I was 27. "And the donation? $500,000. How is that possible?" Uncle Harrison joined us, his face red with what I recognized as embarrassment rather than anger. "Alexandra, why didn't you tell us about your career? Your success? Would it have changed how you treated me tonight?" I asked. The question stopped them cold. Because we all knew the answer. Yes, it absolutely would have changed everything. They would have assigned me a coordination role instead of raffle ticket sales. They would have introduced me to other guests as their accomplished relative instead of letting people assume I was support staff. But they would have treated me differently because of status and recognition, not because I deserved basic respect as a family member working to save lives. "We didn't know," Aunt Catherine said weakly. "You didn't know because you never asked. You saw me working at the hospital and decided what that meant without showing any genuine interest in my work." Rebecca approached hesitantly. "Alexandra, the chief of cardiology position. That's a really big deal, isn't it? It means I perform complex cardiac surgeries, conduct medical research, and supervise a department of 47 medical professionals." 47, Jonathan repeated faintly. "And the $500,000 donation," Marcus added. "That's more than most people make in 10 years. It's an investment in saving lives," I said simply. "Which is what I do every day." The family stood in awkward silence, processing that their struggling relative was actually more professionally accomplished and financially successful than any of them had imagined. 6 months later, the cardiac surgery wing opened to national recognition, featuring articles in medical journals about the advanced procedures now possible in our community hospital. My surgical techniques have been adopted by medical centers nationwide, and I've been invited to speak at conferences across the country. The family dynamic has shifted permanently. I'm no longer the relative they tolerate out of obligation. Aunt Catherine asks about my research, Uncle Harrison wants to discuss investment strategies, and my cousins have developed sudden interest in cardiac health. I still live modestly, still drive my practical sedan, still prefer substance over show. The money is a tool for advancing medical care and improving patient outcomes, not a marker of personal worth. But respect should never have required a spotlight and standing ovation to earn. The people who knew my worth before they knew my recognition. My colleagues in the cardiac department, the nurses who work alongside me during surgeries, the patients whose lives we've saved together, they're still the same. Because genuine respect isn't built on titles or donation announcements. Aunt Catherine called about Thanksgiving plans last week. No mention of volunteer assignments or simple tasks appropriate for my skill level. The Raffle ticket box sits in my office now, a reminder that assumptions about people's worth often say more about the observer than the observed. Last month we performed our 500th cardiac surgery in the new wing. Every one of those patients benefited from equipment and facilities funded by my donation, treated using techniques I developed, cared for by a team I lead. That's worth more than all the networking opportunities and social recognition in the world.